Many outrageous injustices persist in the world today. Some people are exploited and forced to work in dangerous and terrible working conditions. Others are robbed, raped, or victimized in some other way. In all of these cases, perpetrators violate the basic rights of victims and use others merely as a means to benefit themselves. Deontology is an ethical theory that helps explain what exactly is immoral about these cases. On a more positive note, it helps us understand what kinds of moral duties we have towards others and ourselves, and how to figure out exactly how we should act. Ethicists, and those include deontologists, think carefully, systematically, and critically about how to tell good from bad and right from wrong. On the basis of such reflections, they're able to formulate guidelines about what we ought to do and what we definitely should not do. At the core of deontology lies the notion of moral principles. According to deontologists, anyone who has the capacity to act morally also has the duty to do so. Moral principles, then, are a type of moral rules. They provide us with boundaries we may not cross, and they tell us that certain actions are required, not because of some law or convention, but because morality obliges us. As moral beings, we have the moral duty to respect these principles. Perhaps the most basic moral principle is that we should respect human dignity. This abstract duty translates into more specific moral duties, such as the duty to keep our promises and not lie to others, which is the duty of fidelity. The duty not to harm others, which is the duty of non-maleficence. The duty to be kind to others and help those in need, which is the duty of beneficence. The duty to strive to improve yourself, also known as the duty to self-improve. In his theory of deontological pluralism, Sir William David Ross listed 7 of such prima facie duties. Of course, these can come into conflict with each other. Telling the truth can hurt and may actually harm others. Calling an already insecure person overweight, for example, may be speaking the truth, but can harm their self-esteem. When duties and principles conflict, we face a moral dilemma. Some duties are attached to specific roles, such as a physician's duty to correctly inform her patients. Or think of the deontological codes that specify duties for other professions, such as police officers, lawyers, and so on. In contrast, moral duties are general duties that people have as human beings and moral agents towards others and themselves. Christine Korsgaard, a well-known deontologist, argues that we do not only have moral duties towards ourselves and other people, but also towards other animals. After all, animals can have moral rights as well. An important distinction here is that between perfect and imperfect duties. Perfect duties are things we should always do. Imperfect duties are things we should do, where we have some flexibility as to how we fulfill those duties. Think of the duty to help others. You can fulfill this by giving your lunch to a homeless person, but also by donating some of your money to a charity working to alleviate poverty, or by helping a friend move to a new home. According to the best-known deontologist, the 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant, there is really only one perfect duty, which he calls the categorical imperative. This is a kind of absolute duty, which applies at any given time. To make an omelette, for example, you ought to break an egg. But in contrast to such hypothetical imperatives, where you ought to do something in order to achieve a goal, moral imperatives are categorical. We need to follow them no matter what we want to achieve. You should respect human dignity, not to achieve some further goal, like building a good reputation or making it to heaven, but because the moral law requires you. Full stop. Immanuel Kant provides different formulations of his categorical imperative. The first one states that you should act only in ways that are universalizable. When thinking of doing something, you should ask whether the underlying maxim could be a rule that everyone follows. Imagine you consider shoplifting out of boredom. The maxim here is One may steal to entertain oneself. Kant would then ask you to imagine a world in which everyone adopts that maxim. In his view, no one of us would want such a world because it would mean that other people may also steal from us when they are bored. Kant's second formulation of the categorical imperative states that we should never treat others as a mere means, but always as an end in themselves. While it's fine to use others to achieve your own goal, you should always also respect their dignity and rights. For instance, you may hire someone to clean your house, but only if you also take their interests and rights into account. You may never treat them as if they are a mere tool to clean your house. This kind of instrumentalization of people is what is wrong in cases of exploitation or rape. So why is deontology an attractive ethical theory? What are its strong points? First of all, deontology captures a strong moral intuition we all share about duty. Doing the right thing is not something optional. We should be doing it. It also captures strong moral intuitions about human dignity and the inviolability of rights. Second of all, it provides a theoretical underpinning for fundamental values in real-world cases. Think of the importance of informed consent in healthcare or in sexual relationships. The idea that people have a right to say no to a treatment or to a sexual relationship is both fundamental and best captured in a deontological vocabulary. Respecting people entails respecting how they want to use their own bodies. Deontologists then rightly stress and justify the moral constraints and boundaries this imposes on how we interact with each other. So what are the arguments against a deontological approach in ethics? What are its weak points? On the one hand, a pluralist deontological framework, William David Ross, his list of 7 duties, does justice to the many different kinds of obligations we have towards others. But it also faces the challenge of determining what to do when those duties come into conflict with each other. Should I tell the truth when I know it will harm others? On the other hand, a stricter framework in which some duties always trump others quickly becomes too rigorous. Always telling the truth, for example, seems too strict a guideline for the many circumstances we find ourselves in. In fact, the resulting lack of tact can turn you into quite a jerk. So what is deontology's relevance to society? First, the deontologist's insight that people have a right to life, to bodily integrity, and so on, has inspired the idea of human rights. These have been formalized and institutionalized in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which all countries of the United Nations have adopted and pledged to protect. By recognizing and keeping each other to these universal rights, we can make sure that everyone can enjoy the basic rights and liberties. Secondly, in a world in which we all contribute to societal problems, such as climate change, we may feel as if our choices do not really matter. After all, our individual impact on these massive global problems is small. Why reduce our flights if this doesn't impact the total amount of planes in the air? But if we stand by our moral principles, it does not really matter whether the consequences of our choices are big or small. If pollution is a problem, that means that I should be reducing my flights. What matters is that I do the right thing. And of course, if enough others would think and act like this, the world would be a much better place. Deontology can not only make the world a better place, it can also help guide you when faced with personal dilemmas. We may sometimes think that telling a white lie or using someone to our own advantage is justified because it does not seem to harm anyone directly. In these cases, deontology urges us to think critically about our motives. Are we not being too easy on ourselves? Instead of prioritizing our own interests, should we not rather stand by our moral principles that we recognize all too well?